Hey guys, happy Wednesday. We have wrapped up our goat unit. We are going to move into sheep, which is the perfect time of year to cover sheep because Miss Cleaver has baby lambs. We also have sheep down in the barn that have been purchased for student shows projects for next year. So we do have quite a few sheep. My goal is, if I get a good report from the sub today, that we will go down into the barn and that we will look at these sheep. Okay. And so the sheep unit will be similar to the goats, right? We're going to learn those important sheep terms. Tomorrow, we're going to go ahead and kick off starting to learn a little bit of the sheep breeds. And so today's lesson is essentially that. And my goal for today was, I know I've been gone a lot lately, and I'm trying not to leave you a whole bunch of busy work, sub work out of the textbook. And so today we're getting by with no textbooks. Now, you know that I'll be gone days in the future, and how today goes will determine what that looks like, kind of moving forward. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and go through and cover some different aspects of sheep. There are two grades today. You will need a sheet of paper for the grade at the end. And in the middle of the lesson, you're going to have to get up and actually look at taking a quiz on your Chromebook. So be prepared for that. Now, I warned you yesterday that this video is the single most cringy video you will ever watch in your life. You will probably not fall asleep today. And if you do, you seriously lacking some sleep, because I do think this is entertaining. But during the COVID pandemic, many of us absolutely lost our minds, like completely lost our minds. And I was probably the worst. I've never been the same since, a little messed up. And so I created these videos to teach students virtually about sheep. And so you might diagnose me with multiple personality disorder by the end of this, but I think it's an interesting way to learn about different aspects of sheep. And so with that in mind, I'm going to let you guys watch this video. And like I said, there will be two different grades assigned to today. So please pay attention. There will be a quiz in the middle of the video. And with that in mind, welcome to the wonderful world of sheep. Hey, let's meet our newscast. We have Bart the sheep, Nerd Branscum, and the host of the show, Announcer Branscum.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of Shepherd News, where here at Shepherd News we are herding you towards an A. This week we're going to cover a wide range of segments in the ovine industry. What is ovine, you ask? Well, you'll know by the end of this lesson today. We're going to go to several of our newscasters who are going to teach you lessons about the sheep industry. These will help you with your assignments along the way. I'm Announcer Branscum, who will be guiding you along this journey. But it's not just me that's here reporting at Shepherd News. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Bart Branscum. Take it away, Bart.
Bah! It's Bart here, talking to you a little bit about sheep terms, a little bit about my kind. So we want to teach you a little bit today about the terms you need to know when it comes to sheep. First of all, we're going to start with the men, the males that make up our group. Now, if they're not castrated, meaning they're using them for breeding purposes, if they one day have hopes of being a father, we would call them a ram. Think about the Dodge Ram pickup trucks. So male sheep that have not been castrated, we call them a ram. Now, unfortunately, those sheep that are not going to make it to breeding, that we raise for meat purposes, they have to be castrated to improve the meat quality of those sheep. A castrated male sheep, we call them a wether. And that's W-E-T-H-E-R, not spelled like the weather outside. So we have rams that are non-castrated, and we have wethers that are castrated. Now let's move to the females. The females are called ewes, E-W-E, and that is all females. So it's not like cattle, in which we have a heifer that one day becomes a cow. All females are ewes regardless of their age. Now, when they have a baby, we call that a lamb. And I bet you guys knew that already, but a young sheep is called a lamb. And you might also remember that a term for giving birth is where we take the baby's name and we put I-N-G at the end. So giving birth in sheep is called lambing. Now, unfortunately at the network, they make me talk about things sometimes that I'm not so comfortable talking about. And we do recognize that some of my kind, they don't work here anymore because they became meat. But I need you to know those terms for today. So if those little lambs, if they're less than a year of age and they are processed for meat, we call the meat from a young sheep under a year, we call that lamb as well. So lamb can refer to a baby sheep, or it can refer to meat from sheep under a year of age. But if those sheep make it past a year and still get butchered and processed, we call that mutton. Mutton. So meat from a sheep under a year is lamb. Meat from sheep older than a year, we call that mutton. I can't believe they made me talk about this. Back to you, Announcer Branscum.
Thank you, Bart. But just knowing the words is not quite good enough. You also need to be able to look at a sheep and determine, is it a ewe, is it a ram, or a wether? To give us a little awkward lesson in sheep anatomy, we're going to turn over to the third member of our team. The member that we're kind of embarrassed, but due to budget cuts, we had to hire him. Please turn it over to Nerd Branscum. Nerd Branscum, what do you got for us?
Nerd Branscum here, and I'm the smartest member of this here sheepish team, and I'm here to teach you a little bit more about them terms. Bart earlier taught you a little bit about the different words you need to know, but just getting the words right on the quiz, that's not good enough. You gotta be able to look at the sheep, and when you look at them, you gotta be able to tell what they are, and you just can't walk into a barn and go, a ewe is a female sheep. That's not good enough. You gotta look at one and identify it. So I'm here to teach you a little bit of sheep anatomy, and the producers have asked me to keep this G or PG if I can, so I'm gonna keep this as appropriate as possible, but I want you to know some terms right here. First of all, if we talk about a ram, what's the difference in a ram and a wether? Well, I'll tell you, a ram versus a wether, we know that the wether is castrated. So when we look at them, we're going to see one thing they have in common. When we look underneath them, see that little thing right there? That's called a sheath. And the sheath is where they urinate, it's where they breed. It's that part of the male right there. And a ram and a wether, both are going to have it. But this ram has this thing right here called testicles, and we don't like to say that word, it makes us uncomfortable, but it is an important part that we're going to see in the ram. The wethers here have been castrated, which means we normally take a rubber band to cut off circulation and remove that. So if we look at a male, we're going to see a sheath underneath them, and we're going to know, oh, it's a ram or it's a wether. Then we're going to look back here, and if we see them testicles, then it's a ram. But if we don't see them testicles, it's a wether. That's the difference in those two right there. Let's move on to the female. A female is a ewe. So if I look underneath their belly, it's nice and smooth. Nice and smooth. There is no sheath because they're females. If I look behind them, I'm going to see two openings because that is the vulva and the anus. So we have those two right there. But if we look underneath them, we're going to have an udder. Okay? But there may not be a full-fledged udder. It's only going to be if they have babies, right? So a young one's not going to have that. So understand that. Now, what is a ram plus a ewe? You know, this is going to be Nerd Branscum math. But a ram plus a ewe equals a lamb. A lamb. And that's a little baby sheep. Can you tell I'm a nerd, but definitely not an artiste? Yes, right. So we have a lamb right here. So these are the four terms you need to know. And then we take these animals right here and we make delicious, delicious sheep meat out of them. But there are two terms you should know. The first one, if we butcher these lambs, and they don't always have to be little, just younger than a year. If we butcher those lambs, then we get meat that's also called lamb. But if we butcher one of these old ones, we get something called mutton. And mutton's typically a little fattier, a little bit lower quality. The lamb's going to be a little better quality. But those are some terms that you need to know. Mr. Nerd Branscum reporting out.
Wow. And people wonder why we're the lowest rated news network out there. That was disturbing. But that's your lesson for today, ladies and gentlemen. A little bit about the sheep industry. But it's not just the three of us at Shepherd News that make this network run. There are lots of other people, from accounting to marketing. So today's quiz, we're going to introduce you to a couple of our other sheepest members of our team. You're going to see the picture, learn a little bit about them, and tell us exactly what term you would use to describe them. Best of luck as you meet the members of our team.
All right, I wasn't lying when I said this would be cringy. So now what's going to happen is in just a second here, the sub is going to pause this video. When they do, you're going to go down the hallway. You're going to grab a computer. You're going to bring it back, and on Google Classroom, there is a really short quiz covering the terms that I taught you today about sheep. And so in a second, they're going to pause this. You guys are going to take that. When you're done, you're going to put your computer back up. You're actually going to need a small sheet of paper for the next half of what we have here. So they're going to pause this and unpause it when we are all done taking our quiz. All right, the second part of our assignment is really simple. The sub's going to continue this video, and y'all are going to watch the rest of this. On the board are 3 questions that I need you to know these words that I'm going to cover in this next really cringy, awkward video. As you guys watch this, answer these. They're just 1 or 2 words, so not long words, not lots of writing. Answer these as we go. At the end of the hour, you're going to turn that paper in. Your grades for today are 2 grades, actually. It's going to be the quiz that you just took and the papers that you're going to write down for that. So with that in mind, watch the rest of this video, answer those questions, and turn it in, and I'll see you guys in class tomorrow.
Good day, and welcome to another edition of Shepherd's News, your most sheepish publication out there. Now, we know that sheep really have 2 primary purposes. The first one is meat, and really, in the United States, this is becoming the most popular use of sheep. However, there is another purpose, and some of you may be wearing wool garments today, especially in this cold weather. So, let's talk about wool production. And before we get started, one of our co-hosts, Nerd Branscum, has a rant of the day. I'm not really sure what that's meaning, but let's hear rant of the day from Nerd Branscum.
You know what really grinds my gears? PETA, standing for People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. These animal rights organizations post ads that show these bloody stumps of sheep that have just been sheared or clipped. And they imply that when we take the wool off the sheep, that we're cutting them up, that we're removing their skin, that we're making them bleed, that we're making them hurt. And that is crazy. That is bananas. Understand this. Shearing sheep means to take the wool off of them. And it is an important, crucial part of animal welfare. We must remove the wool off them. And we do this in a way that doesn't cut them or anything like that. It doesn't make them bleed. It doesn't take their skin off, but it removes it. Can you imagine every single day of your life putting another coat on and then not taking it off, and the next day putting another one on top? Pretty soon you're going to be overheated. It's going to be bad. We don't want that to happen. With these sheep, just for ethical purposes, we shear them once or twice a year. Even the sheep that we don't raise for wool, we shear them and discard it, kind of like we do with our show sheep. So understand this, shearing sheep is very, very important. We must do it. It's an important thing for animal welfare. Rant over. Back to you, announcer Branscum.
In related news, we would like to share with you a story of Shrek, and this is a real sheep. Shrek is a merino sheep, and this is a breed of sheep that grows wool really, really long. In fact, most of our wool clothing can be made from breeds like Shrek, here, the merino breed. Well, Shrek actually got loose and was lost in the wild for 6 years, fending for himself. A shepherd came upon Shrek about 6 years later, and this is what he found: wool growing uncontrolled, not being clipped each year. This is actually what Shrek looked like. So people began to ask, are there health concerns with sheep like this? And experts say yes. In fact, wool this long, sheep can actually land on their backs like a turtle being stuck on their shell and not be able to get up and die. Sheep in warmer climates can actually overheat and die. So it was very important for welfare purposes to shear Shrek, and actually to be amazed that he survived this long. Look at how small he was after taking all of that wool off. He is certainly a shell of the size of a lamb that he was before. And this brings to light the importance of shearing our sheep at least annually. In related news, we would like to give our listeners just a little more background on wool production and the shearing process of sheep. Here to share some firsthand experience, considering he's been sheared many times, we'd like to turn it over to Bart Branscum. Go ahead, Bart. Tell us a little bit about shearing.
Now, as you look at this beautiful coat that I have growing on me right here, what is the fiber that grows on sheep? Well, I'm guessing all of you know the answer to this right here, but this material that's growing on the outside of me is called wool. I'm sure you all knew that. So the fiber grown on sheep is something that we call wool. Now, the process of removing the wool off sheep is called shearing. And as Nerd Branscom went on a very long rant about, this is an important part of sheep care, whether we keep the wool or not. Now, this is a term that you will need to know. the wool taken from one sheep. So if they just sheared me and collected my wool, that would be called fleece. That would be called fleece. So fleece is the wool taken from just one sheep. Now, what about sheep that we butcher? Because you guys have learned that if we harvest or process an animal, that we want to use every part of the animal. We don't want to waste anything. So if we butcher a sheep or process them, and we have wool that's attached to the hide, so this is a horrible thought for me as a sheep, but basically it has the skin or the hide and the wool attached to it, we call that the pelt. We call that the pelt. So these are important terms that you need to know that tie into wool production with sheep. Back to you, Announcer Branscum.
When we look at the wool production of sheep, understand that all breeds are a little bit different, just like we learned about with cattle, how some breeds specialize in beef production, while others are more of the dairy type. Sheep definitely have different types of wool, and it gives it different uses and value. Some wool is very, very expensive. Other wool has far less value. So if you look right here, you see the merino sheep on the left, and this is a breed that makes very fine wool. And that fine wool can be sold for lots of money. On the right side, we have another breed that's producing more of the carpet wool. So this is more coarse wool. And we have different classes based on the breeds of sheep, and that's not going to mean anything to you today. But tomorrow's newscast, we'll talk about these breeds of sheep. When we look at fiber diameter, this means how big around is the wool on these sheep. And so we have actually coarse, you can see on the left there, which is thicker. We measure this in microns. And on the far right, we have fine wool, which is a lot thinner. And typically your fine wool is going to sell for more money. We look at fiber diameter, and when we look throughout the sheep, you're going to notice different areas of the sheep have better wool. Some areas are going to be a little bit dirty. You can probably think underneath when the sheep lays down. And as we move back towards its rear, we're going to get a little nastier wool. Another term we want you to know is crimp. And crimp is the waviness in the wool fiber. How wavy is it? How much does it flow? So once we shear the sheep, we harvest that wool. Now we have to process it because some of it's not any good. We have to remove the vegetable matter, which is any type of hay, grass, seeds, things that will stick onto their wool. We have to look at tag. What is tag, Mr. Branscum? This is wool that has manure attached to it. So we obviously don't want that on our clothing. It's really too tedious, so we just cut it off. Then we do a process called skirting. So this is removing all the stain, undesirable, the tags, any part of the fleece that is not good. And so we cut that stuff off, and what we have left over is called the yield. And this is the percentage of the wool that's actually good. And the higher that yield is, obviously the more money I make. And we're going to look at about a 40 to 70% yield on that right there. Okay. Next, I'd like to turn over. Looks like Nerd Branscum was buzzing in for one additional thing that he would like to add in.
I just want to add one thing, your announcership, and that is this nasty, greasy stuff that's on sheep. And if you've ever handled a sheep, it gets under your fingernails, it's grimy, and it stinks. It's kind of nasty. And it's called lanolin. 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 And lanolin is the grease-like substance that gets underneath the wool of sheep. But it's a good thing. It annoys me, but it's a good thing. They use it for greases and cream, but it protects the sheep's wool and the sheep's hide. If we were to wash the sheep a lot and get rid of that lanolin, it would actually cause them to break out in fungus. That's not a good thing. So know that greasy substance is called lanolin. Nerd Branscum signing out.
There you have it. Another edition of Shepherd News, where I am still trying to herd you towards an A in this class. I hope you found everything you needed to answer your questions, and we will see you tomorrow for another edition as we travel around the world to look at breeds of sheep. Signing out.
Okay, so go ahead and turn in that paper from today. I'm assuming at this point in the video, we might have a little extra time left in class. And so we're going to continue on with sheep breeds. I do not expect you to do any assignments as long as you're paying attention awake and watching the rest of this video here. But we're going to show the rest of this video until we run out of time in class. And then tomorrow I will jump right in with covering breeds of sheep, and we'll go down to the barn and actually look at some. So anyway, that's the plan for the rest of the hour. So enjoy another cringy video.
Good afternoon, and welcome to a Wednesday edition of Shepherd News, where we are always herding you towards an A. The last couple of days, we have looked at wool production, and we looked at general terms for sheep. But, as we learned yesterday, not all sheep are the same. We learned that some sheep have coarse wool, while others have fine wool. But, what are the differences in these sheep? Today we're going to take you on the travel segment of the Shepherd News Network, where we send our newscast anchors all over the world to explore various breeds and where they came from. This is going to highlight Nerd, Branscum, and Bard as they fly around the world and look at these breeds. Before they take off on their journey around the world, there's two types of sheep breeds that we want you to know about. Turning it over now to Nerd Branscum, he's going to tell you a little bit about those two types of sheep breeds. Take it away, Nerd Branscum.
Now, two terms that I want you to know before we jump into any of these here breeds, and that is open-faced and closed-faced. What does that mean, Nerd Branscum? Well, it's really pretty simple. We have sheep breeds that have wool on their face, and if their wool is covering their face, we call that, closed face. But if they don't have any wool on their face, if their face is open and free of wool, we call that open face. So some of the breeds we look at today are going to be called open face breeds, and some breeds are going to be called closed face breeds. And that's important to know before we take this here journey.
Well, fortunately, Nerd Branscum puts it in a way that is always so ignorant that anybody out there can understand it, no matter what your intelligence level is. Joining us from all the way in France, we would now like to turn it over to Bard, as he tells us about a sheep with a very fancy name. Bard, tell us about the Rambouillets.
Alright, Bard the sheep, coming at you all the way from France, beside the Eiffel Tower. And here in France, I'm going to talk to you about a breed of sheep called the Rambouillets. Now, a little bit of information about the old Rambouillet sheep. They're actually from North France, and they get their name from a king, King Louis, in 1786. And King Louis actually named it after the Rambouillet estate in which they came from. Now, some things I want you to notice about these creatures right here is they are fantastic wool breeds. This is a great sheep for wool production. That is actually one of their biggest positive traits, is that they are a very heavy wool breed. They can adapt to really harsh climate. So we're talking about really dry, really hot, difficult climates. The Rambouillets do really, really well. If you look at some traits about them, you're going to notice that they have a wool-free face. So their face does not have any wool on it at all. Okay? They have 4 downward-facing ears. They are a smaller size. One negative about them is because their wool is so very, very thick, they are susceptible to maggots. So think about you girls with long hair, how it takes a long time for that to dry. So with this wool, if it gets really, really wet, if they're in a very cold, wet climate, that water is not going to dry and they're going to be susceptible to maggots. So that's a little bit about the Rambouillet sheep breed. This is a very heavy wool breed. Back to you.
Thank you, Bart. Now, next we're going to go to the country that honestly most of our major sheep have came from, and that is England, as most of our breeds are European, if you can't tell already. So, here to join us all the way from England, we would like to turn it over to Nerd Branscum.
Oh, shucks. I thought you said Iceland, not England. I ended up in the wrong location. Let me get on my jetpack and I'll head right over to England ASAP.
Oh my goodness, Nerd Branscum. We said England, not Iceland. Well, I guess the show must go on while Nerd Branscum makes it all the way to England from Iceland. We're going to turn it over to Bart, as Bart takes us to Spain to look at the other major wool breed, the Merino. Take it away, Bart.
The final breed that I have the opportunity to share with you today comes from Spain, and this is one of the most important sheep breeds in the world. It's called the Merino sheep breed. The Merino sheep breed has been around for centuries. In fact, most of our wool breeds descend from the Merino. The Rambouillets, for example, come from Merino sheep. Now, Merino sheep are a little bit bigger than the Rambouillets, but we're still talking about sheep that have very, very heavy wool. Merino sheep are considered to have the best quality wool of any sheep breed in the world. So we see these big old animals with huge wool, great wool quality, not as much a meat-producing animal, even though we'll still eat them, of course, but they are more of a wool breed sheep. So the two wool breed sheep we talked about today were both on my visits. We talked about the Rambouillet, and we talked about this creature right here, the Merino.
Alright, this just in. It sounds like Nerd Branscum has finally figured out his country and he has made it to Great Britain, England. So Nerd Branscum is going to show us 5 sheep breeds that originate in England. Take it away, Nerd Branscum.
Alright, Nerd Branscum here on top of the world, here to talk to you about the English sheep breeds, the breeds that came from England, and you're going to notice half the breeds that we talk about today are from this one awesome nation right here. So let's drive right in and look at them. The first one we have is called the Southdowns. Now the Southdowns came from England over 200 years ago. They came over to the United States. Now some good things about them is they mature really early, so they hit their lambing, being able to reproduce at a very young age. This is good because we get more money from them. The quicker they reproduce, the more lambs we get, the more money we make. That is great. They're also known for good lambing abilities, so their mothers don't have as much issues giving birth. Now when we look at these creatures right here, what's the distinguishable trait about a Southdowns sheep? Well, the first thing I want you to see is that they have a lighter, kind of creamier colored wool. We actually refer to it in your book as a mousy brown colored wool on their face. So know that term, mousy brown. What does that mean? I'm really not sure, but this is what it looks like. But the big thing I want you to see is know this. They have small ears and they have wool down on their face and down their legs. Look at these sheep right here. See how their entire face is covered in wool? It goes all the way down. It's around their eyes. Most of the sheep breeds we talk about today are not going to fit in that description. So Southdowns sheep have wool down their face, down their legs. That's what makes them a Southdowns. And they also have that mousy brown colored wool. Let's move on across the country to the next one. We got the Hampshire sheep. Now the Hampshires are a very popular club lamb operation. They came in Hampshire County in England. A couple of details about them is they have mostly a wool-free face and mostly a wool-free legs. They have some wool on their legs, but not a whole lot. Not like them old Southdowns. But they have a wool cap on top of them. So they have a wool cap on top of their head, but then a wool-free face and mostly a wool-free legs, okay? They are a larger breed, so they grow really fast, and that's going to lead to the positive traits of them. They are known for rapid growth and efficient feed conversion. And we talked about feed conversion when we talked about animals last week, nutrition, right? So if I feed to these sheep, these little sheepies right here are going to grow so much faster than all of the other sheep out there. And so that's going to give you just a little bit about the old Hampshire breed. Now as we move on to the next one, put my glasses on so I can see just a little bit better. We got the Suffolk sheep. Now if we look at the Suffolk sheep, these sheep actually come from England, of course, as well. But you're going to notice what really sets them apart is they don't have any wool on their face and any wool on their legs. They have very black faces and very black legs, okay? They are a bigger sheep. Another distinguishable trait about them is this Roman nose. What does that mean? I thought we were talking about England. Okay, if I look at this curve of its face, okay, that is a Roman nose. The Roman nose on the sheep, you're going to see that in a Suffolk sheep. Black heads, black legs, no wool on either one, but of course we got wool on their bodies, okay? When we look at the positives of these things, these are also very fast, efficient growing sheep with lots of bone and structure. And so that's some positives that we might get from the old Suffolk breed. Moving on to number 4, we got Shropshires. And I will tell you, when Nerd Branscum was just a wee little third grader, the very first sheep I ever showed was a Shropshire. When we talk about the Shropshires, they come from the hills of Shropshire, England. In the mid-1840s is when this breed was developed. If we look at some of their traits, they're just average size sheep. But they have wool on the head, and they also have some wool down the face and underneath their jaw. That's actually going to be the distinguishing characteristic. We're going to see the wool actually come underneath the jaw of this here sheepies, okay? So that's, a benefit of those things there. And they have very small ears, so they're the opposite of old Nerd Branscum right here. Instead of my big old huge ears, these little sheepies have little small tiny ears. And so that's something about the Shropshires. Now here's something you should know about them when we talk about positivity. They're what we call a multi-purpose breed. Man, I'm learning you some good words today. Multi-purpose breed means we're using them for more than one purpose. So people actually use these for meat, wool, and dairy. So they are the heaviest wool producing meat breed. So we raise them mostly for meat, but we actually get some pretty good wool quality on them. So that's a positive of Shropshires. And then the very last one we're talking about here in England is the Dorsets. The Dorsets. And the Dorsets actually are one of the oldest breeds. They date all the way back to the Middle Ages with them little sword fights and riding on the horses, you know, Middle Ages there. So look at these Dorsets right here, and we see some things about them. The distinguishable trait is they have a white face, and they have no pigmentation on the hoofs, the nose, the eyes, or the ears. So you can see that. See how it's pink? They don't have any real color there. Okay, so pigmentation free, no wool on their face, but they will have wool on top of their heads. The biggest positive of these is they're really good milkers and they can breed out of season. And we're going to talk more about this later, but know this, that all sheep typically breed in the winter. And in the summer, a lot of breeds of sheep don't cycle. They don't come into heat. They can't be bred, except for the Dorsets. The Dorsets will come into heat even out of season when some sheep breeds won't, so we can breed them more often year-round, and they produce more milk. There's 5 old breeds of sheep from England. Back to you, Announcer Branscum.
Now, on his way back home in the United States, there was a sheep breed that was developed right here, actually just one state away from Oklahoma. To tell us about that sheep breed, we'd like to turn it over to Bart. Take it away, Bart.
Boy, it's great to be back in the good old U.S. of A. And today I'm going to talk about a breed here in the United States that was developed right here called the Montadale. And the Montadale was developed in the 1900s somewhere in about Missouri. And in Missouri, in the state of misery here, if I can find my notes here, this breed, as you can see, it is very, very tall. And it's a very tall, lanky. A lot of students were like, it looks kind of like a deer, Mr. Branscum, and you know, it really kind of does. So it's a very tall, lanky animal. They are known for having very, very small heads. So the opposite of old Mr. Branscum once here again. Very, very small heads. Why is that so great? Because it leads to less birthing issues. It's easier for them to be born. They're also known for super, super white wool. You can notice here, they are very, very white. That is great because we want that white wool because it's easier to dye it different colors when we talk about making different things out of it. So that's a couple of positives. Small heads lead to less birthing issues, and then that white wool is going to be a better quality just because of that color. Back to you, Announcer Branscum.
And for our final 2 breeds of sheep that we want you to know about today, we would like to turn it over to, yes, you guessed it, Nerd Branscum, who went all the way down to South Africa to tell us about a sheep breed that definitely looks much different than all the other breeds. Kind of like Nerd Branscum does. Go ahead, Nerd Branscum.
Hello, man. It's Nerd Branscum coming at you from South Africa.
Nerd Branscum, you're talking in a Jamaican accent. This is South Africa. You're not even in the same continent.
Oh, sorry. I'm not very good with my geography if you can't figure out. I'm going to take you all the way down south to South Africa to talk about a breed that is becoming really popular in Oklahoma over the last decade. And that breed's called the Dorper. And the Dorper, some people are going to look at this and go, oh, Nerd Branscum, that's not a sheep, that's a goat. And they look a lot like a goat. They're actually called hair sheep. And so they don't have any wool at all. Instead, they have lots of hair. And this was developed down there in South Africa. Obviously, a little bit of a warmer climate. And so when we talk about some of the traits of these here creatures, that is positive, that is good, right? They can withstand hotter climates. That is a good thing right there. We talk about areas that have a little rainfall that's really, really warm. We're going to get good traits out of them there. They're not as big. They don't grow as much. They don't have as much meat. But they're tougher and hardier animals than probably any breed of sheep that we're talking about. Back to you, man. Oh, I almost forgot one more. And this one looks like it's right out of a horror film. Check this thing out right here. This is called a Jacob sheep. And it's actually got biblical references. It's one of the oldest breeds of sheep in the world. But look at this thing. It's crazy. It can have 2, 4, or 6 horns on its head. It looks straight out of a demon possession movie. It is a Jacob sheep, and they're crazy looking. They've got all these weird looking horns. These are very undeveloped breed. It means they've been around for a long time, but we haven't done a whole lot with them. One positive about them is that they do have really good wool quality, but we don't really raise them a lot here in the United States.
Well, there you've had it. 10 sheep breeds that we want you to know for this unit. For your assignment today, you're going to log on to a Google slide. And based on what we've covered here today, you're going to go to each sheep breed and you're going to tell us one positive thing that sheep breed brings to the industry. Just like Nerd Branscum, sheep breeds that might have lots of flaws at least have one, we hope, good trait about them. Next, you're going to tell us one distinguishable trait. This is important because down the road you will be taking a quiz in which you look at the pictures and look for these traits to know which breed of sheep it is. I'm announcer Branscum, and this is a Wednesday edition of The Sheep, the Shepherd Network, where here at the Shepherd Network we forget our name. Good day.